They thought she was just another quiet woman in a surplus jacket, someone forgettable, someone who didn't belong. They were about to find out how wrong they were. It started on a warm Saturday morning at Fort Darlington, a military base nestled just beyond the city limits. The kind of place where ranks matter, where discipline is visible in the way boots hit pavement, and where newcomers are eager to prove they understand the rules. That day, the base hosted a joint community outreach, event, a civilian-military exercise designed to impress local law enforcement and showcase unity. Among the bustle of personnel and volunteers, one woman moved quietly across the logistics zone. She was small in stature, around 40, hair pulled back in a strict bun, no name tag, no rank, just a worn olive-drab jacket that had clearly seen better years. Her hands were steady as she lifted a heavy supply crate with practiced ease. "Hey, you there, Imam?" a sharp voice rang out. "That's not regulation issue." Lieutenant Connor Reeves, fresh out of officer candidate school, 24 and brimming with textbook confidence, pointed directly at her. His brows tightened as he closed the distance. "You can't wear that jacket. It's military property. Remove it immediately." The woman paused mid-step. She didn't argue. She didn't flinch. She simply looked at him just once and kept walking toward the equipment tent. "You heard the lieutenant," another voice barked. "Staff Sergeant Kyle Rivers, stern and by the book. We're going to need to see some identification." She stopped then, slowly setting the crate down. Around her, a crowd had started to gather, soldiers, volunteers, even civilians. Eyes flicked from Reeves to the woman and back again. "I said," the lieutenant raised his voice, "this is a direct order. Take off the jacket now." Phones started coming out, some already recording. A confrontation was brewing. Still, she said nothing. For 3 years, Evelyn Hart had worked quietly in Fort Darlington's logistics division. She managed medical inventory, processed endless forms, stocked emergency kits, and tracked field equipment. No one really knew where she came from. Most assumed she was a civilian contractor. Some whispered she might have been former military. None ever asked. She never wore rank, never signed her name, never spoke unless spoken to. She showed up early, stayed late, and when the job was done, she disappeared into the background like fog at dawn. But now she was in the spotlight, accused of stolen valor, disrespected in front of the same people she had quietly served for years. Master Sergeant Bennett, the logistics chief, pushed through the onlookers. He recognized her immediately. "Lieutenant, what's the situation here?" he asked. "This woman," Reeves said with a snap, "is impersonating military personnel. That jacket is unauthorized." Bennett looked from the young officer to the quiet woman. He'd worked alongside her every week. Never once had she caused a problem. "Ma'am," he said gently, addressing her with surprising formality, "if you're not currently enlisted, I'm going to have to ask you to remove that jacket and provide identification." And finally, Evelyn nodded. No resistance, no explanation. She simply unzipped the faded fabric and let it fall to the ground. Beneath, she wore a plain olive t-shirt, clean, fitted, unremarkable. But then, she rolled up her left sleeve. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't defiant, it was deliberate, quiet, like she was revealing something sacred. And what the crowd saw made the air go still. A scarred tattoo stretched across her upper arm, charred around the edges as if burned long ago. It was crude, but unmistakable. A dagger through a torn American flag, blackened and cracked with time. Beneath it, a military stencil read simply, D-17. Gasps, someone whispered, "Wait, that's not a real unit, is it?" "No," a voice said, low and shaken. "That's Delta 17. Rivers blinked. "That's a myth. That unit was wiped out years ago. Lang sector, I think." "That wasn't a myth," came a different, voice older, female, sharp. Colonel Margaret Rains stepped forward from the observation deck, heels clicking crisply against the asphalt, her eyes locked onto Evelyn's scar. "There were only 2 people authorized to wear that mark," she said. "One of them died in the Lang sector fires, 2018. The other is standing right in front of you." The crowd froze. And Lieutenant Reeves? He went pale. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The crowd that had once circled her with suspicion now stood frozen in a weaned confusion. Colonel Rains walked closer to Evelyn Hart, her voice level but laced with disbelief. "You were listed as Kaya. The entire Delta 17 team was reported lost. There was nothing left at the site." Evelyn met the colonel's eyes with quiet calm. "There was enough left to bury," she said softly, "but not enough to remember us by." Lieutenant Reeves looked like someone had knocked the wind out of him. "That can't be. The report said everyone died, that the compound was obliterated." "That's what they were supposed to believe," Evelyn replied. Master Sergeant Bennett stepped back, trying to process what he was hearing. "Delta 17. That was the classified logistics unit, wasn't it? Operating out of Lang's sector?" Colonel Rains nodded slowly. "Yes. A forward-deployed unit supporting Black Ops missions in hostile territory. The kind of operations that never show up on the news. They were the backbone medical, munitions, equipment support." Her gaze never left Evelyn. "Your CO was Captain David Kim, correct?" Evelyn's eyes flickered, just for a moment. "Yes, ma'am." "And the final mission," Rains paused, choosing her words carefully. "It went off, book." Evelyn's voice remained calm, but her jaw tightened. "It went to hell." The crowd was listening now, not with suspicion but with reverence. They wanted the story. They needed to understand who this woman really was. She didn't speak like someone looking for attention. She spoke like someone carrying weight years of it. "The 15th of March, 2018, she began. "Lang Sector Base was hit just before dawn. Intelligence failure. Maybe a leak. 47 enemy combatants rockets. Small arms, mortars from 3 directions. The depot was designed to be abandoned in case of breach. Protocol said destroy the cache and evacuate." Her voice dipped. "But we had wounded inside. They were too unstable to move, 7 of them." She closed her eyes for a breath, as if seeing it again. "Captain Kim ordered the evac. He and 2 others held the perimeter. I stayed inside. I was the unit medic. It was my call." Someone in the back murmured, "You stayed?" Evelyn opened her eyes again. 3 hours, alone, moving between windows, using whatever I could find to hold them off. I ran out of ammo, so I made a choice. Colonel Rains already knew what was coming. Her posture stiffened. "There was a fuel depot, aviation grade, thousands of gallons," Evelyn continued, voice unwavering. "I rigged it to blow, timed it, got the wounded into a single evac vehicle, set the timer. We made it to the extraction point with 90 seconds to spare." Silence. Again. "You blew the entire facility," Reeves said, his voice barely audible. Evelyn nodded. "The enemy was wiped out. The blast could be seen from 15 miles away." Rains added, "And the report claimed everyone died, including you." "I was recovered under an alias," Evelyn said. "Severe burns, smoke damage, vocal cord trauma. I couldn't speak for nearly 2 months. And by then," she shrugged lightly, "my unit didn't exist anymore. We'd been scrubbed." A young private whispered, "You could have come back, taken medals, a hero's welcome." Evelyn looked down at her arm at the scarred tattoo still etched into burned flesh. "Heroes don't come home alone." Bennett took a slow breath, then asked, "Why stay silent? Why not reclaim your rank, your record?" Evelyn answered without hesitation, "Because silence was the only way to honor them. They died doing their job, so I decided I'd do mine for them. No rank, no patch, just service." Colonel Rains took a long, thoughtful step forward. "You could have walked away," she said. "You could have taken the medal, the pension, the recognition." "I didn't need a parade," Evelyn replied. "I needed to keep the machine running, quietly, so no one else would have to make that choice again." At that moment, something unspoken passed through the crowd. A shift. The woman they mocked was no longer an anonymous figure in surplus green. She was a survivor, a warrior, a symbol of everything the uniform stood for without ever needing to wear one again. And that jacket on the ground? No longer just fabric. It was a flag that had been misunderstood until now. Reeves stepped forward, visibly shaken. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, I didn't—" Evelyn raised a hand gently. "Don't apologize for doing your job. You saw something that didn't look right, and you challenged it. That's what leaders are supposed to do." "But I accused you of stolen valor," he said, voice cracking. "I humiliated you." She looked at him for a moment, then said quietly, "You didn't humiliate me. You gave me a reason to speak." The tattoo on her arm caught the sunlight, burned, broken, but still defiant. And finally, the name that had been missing from the records for 7 years was whispered across the base. Staff Sergeant Evelyn Hart. Delta 17. Alive. By sundown, Evelyn Hart's name was no longer a whisper, it was a ripple. Across the base, soldiers were retelling what they'd seen that morning like it was legend in real time. Phones buzzed with grainy clips of her rolling up her sleeve. Messages pinged through group chats. Did you see her tattoo? She's Delta 17. She survived Lang. And just like that, the quiet woman from logistics wasn't invisible anymore. But Evelyn? She kept moving like nothing had changed. That evening, she returned to the warehouse as if it were any other day, organizing pallets of surgical gauze, restocking IV bags, reviewing outdated tourniquets. Her clipboard in hand, her movements methodical. The only difference was the faint crease in her sleeve rolled just high enough for the 17th of March K to breathe. Lieutenant Reeves found her there, awkward in his still too stiff uniform, standing just outside the doorway like a kid about to face the principal. He cleared his throat. "Ma'am, Staff Sergeant Ty, Evelyn didn't look up. "You're not in trouble, Lieutenant." "I should be," he said quickly. "I was disrespectful. I embarrassed myself and the service." She paused, then set the clipboard down and looked him in the eye. "You followed protocol. You questioned something that didn't make sense. That takes discipline." Reeves shook his head. "But I also made assumptions. I saw an older woman in an old jacket and thought, imposter." Evelyn let a breath rest between them before answering. "Assumptions are dangerous. But sometimes they lead to truth. And sometimes the truth needs an excuse to come out." He was quiet, unsure what to say next. So she added, "Besides, I've been mistaken for invisible for years. It was kind of nice being reminded I still exist." That made him laugh nervously. Then his face grew serious again. "You could have asked for recognition, for benefits, for everything." She picked up the clipboard. "And miss watching your face when you realized I wasn't who you thought I was?" That startled a grin from him. She winked. But not everything was laughter. The next morning, Colonel Rains called a meeting with the base leadership. Not in a conference room, not with fanfare, just a quiet gathering near the warehouse loading bay. She stepped forward holding a weathered personnel folder, Evelyn's file, reactivated from archive storage, marked once with the cold label, "Presumed KIA." "This is Staff Sergeant Evelyn Hart," the colonel announced. "Delta 17, Classified Logistics Operations, Lang Sector. She held the line alone during a breach in 2018, saving 7 wounded soldiers at the cost of her team and her own anonymity." No one spoke. She was offered full reinstatement. She declined. She asked for no honors, no medals, no ceremony. The colonel turned to Evelyn, standing off to the side like she didn't quite belong. "Would you reconsider?" Rains asked, voice gentle. "We could restore your service record, your rank, even promotion." Evelyn didn't hesitate. "I appreciate that, ma'am, but I'm exactly where I need to be." "You don't want your name cleared?" She smiled faintly. "My name was never the point. The mission was." A moment passed. Then Master Sergeant Bennett stepped forward, holding a new placard in his hands. Just a simple wooden sign, no shine, no brass. It read, "Heart Unit, for those who serve in silence." The colonel nodded. "Effective immediately, this logistics section will be named in your honor." Evelyn's expression didn't change much, but something flickered in her eyes. Not pride, not grief, something deeper, recognition. Recognition not for her but for those who didn't come home. The next week, the base chapel hosted an unofficial gathering. No flag-draped caskets, no speeches from generals. Just a small memorial plaque etched with 7 names Delta 17's lost. At the bottom, a quiet inscription. They served in silence. They died with honor. They are remembered. Evelyn stood at the back. When the chaplain read the names aloud, her hand rose slowly to her brow and for the first time in 7 years, she gave a full military salute. Captain David Kim, Sergeant Lopez, Corporal Jensen, Private Walsh. Each name like a wound reopened, each syllable like breath taken for someone who couldn't breathe anymore. The crowd noticed, but no one said a word. Because in that moment, everyone understood. She wasn't saluting the past. She was completing it. In the weeks that followed, nothing changed, and yet everything had. Evelyn Hart still arrived before dawn, still wore her faded olive t-shirt, still signed off on supply requests with a simple scrawl. The only difference now, people looked at her. Not in pity, not in doubt, but with quiet reverence. And though she never wore her jacket again, her left sleeve was always rolled just high enough for the burned D17 tattoo to peek out like a banner not of pride, but of memory. Private First Class Layla Munro, barely 18 and fresh from basic, found herself trailing Evelyn one afternoon. "Ma'am?" she asked softly, hesitating near a stack of wound dressings. Evelyn turned, one brow raised. "What's on your mind?" "The Lang sector fire," Layla said, voice barely above a whisper. "Was it really as bad as they say?" Evelyn took a moment, her hands stilled on the box she was sorting. She looked up, eyes steady. "It wasn't the flames that stayed with me," she said quietly. "It was the silence after." Layla frowned. "I don't understand." "You will," Evelyn said almost to herself. "When you lose, people really lose them. The world goes quieter. Their voices vanish. Their jokes, their footsteps, the way they used to interrupt you mid-sentence gone." She rested a hand gently on her scarred tattoo. "This ink isn't pretty," she added. "It's warped, burned, but it's still here, like they are." Layla stared at her. "Do you regret not speaking up sooner?" Evelyn didn't answer right away. Instead, she turned toward the window where the sun angled low across the tarmac. "I regret that someone had to accuse me before their story was heard. They deserved more than my silence. But if speaking would have turned them into headlines, or propaganda, or forgotten slogans, then maybe silence was the better tribute after all." A week later, someone slipped a small laminated card under Evelyn's office door. It read, "Thank you for staying. Some of us never forget the ones who held the line so we could grow up safe." Anonymous. She never found out who wrote it. She never needed to, because the base had changed. Not in rules, not in leadership, but in awareness. There was a new respect unspoken, but deeply felt for the quiet figures in faded jackets, the warehouse workers with steel in their posture, the cafeteria cooks with 1,000-yard stares. Soldiers began to understand that not all heroes walk loud. Some burn, and return not to claim glory, but to keep others from burning too. And Evelyn? She just kept doing what she'd always done, processing supply manifests, checking expiry dates, fixing broken clipboards, keeping the machine running quietly, completely, relentlessly. She didn't chase vindication. She didn't bask in recognition. She didn't even mention Delta 17 again, because she knew that true honor didn't live in medals or parades. It lived in the weight of responsibility and the decision to carry it whether anyone ever clapped or not. One morning, she passed by a group of junior officers arguing over protocols. One of them scoffed, "Why do we even bother checking the backup generators every week?" Evelyn didn't stop walking, but as she passed, she murmured just loud enough to be heard, "Because someone out there is counting on them, and you won't know it until it's too late." They fell silent. Weeks turned into months. The Heart unit became a kind of whispered legend. New recruits were told to watch out for the quiet woman with the sleeve, because she'd teach you more about honor than any training manual ever could. Eventually, HQ offered her one final chance: official commendation, a full reinstatement with ceremony, news coverage, the whole 9 yards. She declined. Instead, she asked for one thing: a bench. Just a small bench, outside the logistics warehouse, nothing engraved, no plaque. But every time someone sat there, tired from duty or deep in thought they'd find, carved softly underneath the seat. To serve in silence is not to be forgotten. D17. Greatness doesn't always wear medals. Sometimes it wears scars. Sometimes it walks past you in silence, holding up the world while no one watches. Evelyn Hart didn't need applause. She needed her silence to mean something, and no, it does. Have you ever met someone who served quietly without asking for recognition? Let's honor them below, share their name or their story. Some heroes don't wear rank, they wear memory.